Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis at the very top. After the Gemara brings several different herbs that bring a person to Tuma, the Gemara now speaks about one of these herbs, the gargir. Vayetze echod el hasode lilaket orois. The pasuk in Malachim states that he went out to one of the fields to gather orois. Ask the Gemara, Tana Mishmei Rav Meir, Ze Gargir, what is this? It's referring to Gargir. Omar Rabbi Yochanan, Lama Nikra Shemen Orois. Why is it called Orois? Refers to light. Shemeirois Es Ha'einayim, because it brings illuminance to one's eyes. Omar Rav Huna Hamoitze Gargir. If he finds one of these herbs, Im Yochel La'ochloi Oichl. If he's able to consume it, to eat it, he should do so. V'im lav ma'viro al gabe einav. If not, he should at least pass it over his eyes. Omar Rapapa says, Begar gira mitzarno. The gargi that we're talking about is growing in the area where it's on the sides, by the gevul. Why? Because there, it doesn't share any of the yanika with other types of plants, whereby it gets all of its strength to then be meir es ha'einayim. Says the Gemara Rav Gidol Marav, Achsanoi, also on the subject of bringing to carry to Tuma, he says, Achsanai lo yoichal beitzim. One who is a guest and sleeping over one's house, he should not eat beitzim, because it can lead to carry. V'lo yishan betalisoy shel bal habayis. And he should also not sleep with the garments of the bal habayis, who then will use those garments perhaps the next day and then see that there is carry on those garments. The Gemara says now that there are certain Amoroim, because of their Roiv Kedushosom, they were extra careful not to have wrong Hiruhurim to lead to carry, and therefore when they would visit certain places and leave their wives, they would try to then seek out another woman to be married to. Says the Gemara, Rav ki mikloi le Darshish. When Rav would visit the city, the area called Darshish, Machris, he would announce, Man havya liyoima. Is there a woman who wants to be wed for some days while I am there? Rav Nachman kad mikla l'shekhanitziv. He would visit the area of Shchanisiv, and Machris, he would also announce the same thing as Rav. Man havya liyoima. Is there a woman who's interested in being wed for the time that I'm there? In other words, they would arrive at the town, have this woman who was now technically married to them, and then after they would leave the town, before they would take leave, they would divorce her. And this would then keep them shamur, keep them protected from the wrong types of thoughts. I asked the Gemara Vatanya, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Oimer, he states the following, Lo yisa adam isha b'medina zu v'yelech v'yisa isha medina acheres. A person should not marry a woman in this area, this region, and then go ahead into a different region and marry somebody else. Why? Shema yizdavgu zu eitzel zu v'ninsa ach noisa achoisa. Perhaps when he marries one woman in one region, they'll have a child, let's say a boy. He marries another woman in a separate, faraway region, and they have a child and they have a girl. That boy and that girl could sometime in the future get together as husband and wife, not knowing that they're brother and sister. Then that will lead them to have children who are then illegitimate children. Mamzerois. On that, the pasuk states that you're filling up the world with zima. So therefore, how is this possible? That they have left their wives and their families in one region, one area, then come to another city and get married to another woman. Perhaps there'll be a child from that union, whereby, again, each child would marry the other child, and they'll then be married, a brother to a sister. Answers the Gemara, Amarei Abonon Kala Islu. These were Chachamim of great standing, and they had tremendous names. In other words, they had a big reputation, to whereby, if there was a child from either Rav or from Nachman, it would be known, a kol would go out, and therefore everybody would know that this came from them. Ask the Gemara Vama Rovet still Tiva'ua l'naseh v'nispaisa tzricha leishav shivas nikim. We have a principle, a ruling that if a man is toveya a woman to be married to him, and therefore she then accepts, because of her excitement, she might be poilet a dam chimud, and therefore rendering her into tuma, into a nida, and bitame for shiva yomim. So therefore, after such a proposal, she has to then separate 7 days of nikim before she's together with her husband, her new husband. Says the Gemara, Rabban adu yehavim odu lahu. The Rabban and these sages would then make it known in advance before they would come to these cities. Mikdam havu makadme umeshandri shlucha. They would send a shaliach to then tell in advance that they're coming to town, whereby if there was a woman that indeed wanted to accept such a proposal, so then they would already take care of them 7 days beforehand, whereby when they would come, they would be mutter to their new husbands. Vi'i bois ema, and if you want, you can answer the following. Instead, Yechude have miyachteluhu. They merely came to miyached with these women, not in order to then have a nesuin and be together with them in a relationship of a marital relationship, but rather just to be miyached alone with them. They didn't have any intention to be with them in a way of husband and wife, but only to be alone in the same room. That itself would be sufficient to then protect them from the wrong thoughts of other women, since now they have pas besalo. Mefarshim explain that if indeed they did want to then be mizdaveg, to be together with their new wives, so then there wouldn't be an issue of the shiva nikim, because that's only when there's a time in between. But if there's no time in between and they're together right away, then there won't be any issue of dam chimud. The Gemara brings the following Mishnah that is a continuation of what we were speaking till now, and that is other types of preparations of the Kohen Gadol prior to Yom HaKippurim. Says the Mishnah, Masruhu Ziknei Bezdin, Leziknei Kuna. The Leziknei Bezdin, these sages of the Bezdin from the Sanhedrin, who we spoke about in the previous Mishnah, who then taught and read before the Kohen Gadol the various psukim of the Avodah, and they taught him the Avodah, they are going to give this Kohen Gadol over to the Ziknei Kahuna, the sages of the Kahuna. Now this was really done every day in order to have the Kohen Gadol prepared by the Ziknei Kahuna in order to learn how to perform the burning of the Ketares when he's in the Kodesh Kadoshim. That was a very difficult avodah. It was of the most difficult of the avodos, and what required was the Kohen Gadol to enter with a pan of gecholim, of coals, and with one hand, another hand he had to have then a shovel of ketares, and then he had to somehow get the ketares to be completely in his hands, both palms, so that he'd have to really hold that shovel with his teeth, so that it pours into his hands, and none of it gets wasted. All of it then is burned in the Kodesh Kadoshim on those coals. So he had to learn how to do that from the Ziknei Kahuna. It states over here, "Ve'elihu beis avitinos." They would bring him up to the beis avatinos, where that's where they would prepare the ketares. The hishbiu, on the last time that they did this hishbiu, they would mashbia, they would require that him take a shvua. V'niftru v'holchu lahem, and then they would take leave of him. V'amru lo, and this is what they would say to him in making him take the shvua. The following: Ishi Kohen Gadol, dear Kohen Gadol, Onu shluchei bezdin va'ata shlucheinu v'shliach bezdin. We are shlichei bezdin, and you are our shluchim, and also shliach bezdin. In other words, the shvua that you're about to then take is a shvua that's not only what we're saying, but it's a shvua that is al pi bezdin. In other words, you can't then try to say it's a different interpretation of the shvua. The shvua is on the understanding of the bezdin. Mashbin anu alecho. We are going to then make you take the shvua b'misha shikein shmo b'bayis hazeh, for the one who is resting his presence, the Shechina, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in this house, in this Beis Hamikdash. Shelo tishane davar mikol ma she'amarnu lecha, that you will not change anything from that we had taught you in burning these kitaris. In other words, there was the tzedaikim who had learned erroneously the psukim in the Torah, and they held that when the Kohen Gadol goes before he goes even into the Kodesh Kodashim, he already lights the kitaris before going in. And we have a Masara that is indeed different. Our Masara is that only once the Kohen Gadol is inside the Kodesh Kodashim does he then burn the kitaris. So therefore they're making mashbiya the Kohen Gadol that he will not then, because we will see when he's doing this avodah, that he will not then burn the kitaris before him, but rather the way that he is taught to do so inside the Kodesh Kodashim. And he has to answer Amen, so that the shvuah is a shvuah that he is making. He separates from them and he cries. They separate from him and they cry. Why? Because he separates from them and cries that they were choshid him. And they separate and cry because they had to be choshid him. The Mishnah continues, Im haya chacham, if this Kohen Gadol is a chacham, we're talking about now the night of Yom Kippurim, where he's supposed to stay up all night, not to go to sleep. If he's a chacham, then darish. He is to darish a halachos, to keep him up. V'im lav, if he's not a bar hochi, to darish halachos himself. Talmidei chacham darishin lefonim. Then there will be talmidei chacham who will then darish halachos in front of him. V'im rogil likrois kare. If he's not somebody who can even understand the drashas of the Talmidei Chachamim, like we said in the previous Gemaras, that during Bayis Sheni there were Kohanim Gedolim that are Amei Haaretz, and therefore, if they are not somebody who a Kohen Gadol can understand the drashas, then in Rogel Likros, if they are able to read, then Karin, they will read. In other words, there he used to always use from Tanakh that was like from a scroll, as we have in the Sefer Torah. So therefore, it didn't have any nekudos, and therefore one had to understand and you have to be a baki in the reading to be able to read themselves. V'im lav, if he's not able to read, then karin lefon, they would read in front of him. Uvamek karin lefon, what would they read in front of him to keep him awake? Says the Mishnah, Bi'ioiv, Bi'ezra, U'b'divei hayomim. From Sifrei Iyov, Ezra, and Divei Hayomim, each one has their own unique aspects to be Moishech, the lave of the Kohen Gadol. Zechariah ben Kivutol Oimer, he says, Pa'amim harbe karisi lefona bin Daniel. He said, many times I read before the Kohen Gadol from Sefer Daniel. Some Mefarshim explain this is just an example that indeed all of the Svarim from Tanakh can be read because all of them have the aspect to be Moishech es halev shel HaKohen Gadol.